Hey people, it's April 25th, South Mississippi. We finally got that long awaited rain. All my rain barrels and my overflow devices are filled up. And you see a little turtle down here. And I think that was the bottom of yesterday. I posted a turtle video yesterday that tanked. I walked outside and caught them having a threesome. Either you can't write sex or you can't write threesome on YouTube or they shut your video down. But I think that's Alice under there because she looks real curious. Let me pull her out and get a closer look. Is that Alice? Yeah, that's Alice. You can tell by this on the bottom of the shell here. Got a little destruction here. See how this side is more rounded. So Alice looked like she coming for some food. Let me get her some watermelon. About some watermelon. My container garden is doing best. This corn's looking good here. There's some sweet corn. And this big old cabbage is doing the best. I thought I'd put my squash in a container this year. It was so hard. The bugs is getting down low last year. But all my barrel cabbages is looking good. This one I put in an old column. This is a ceramic column. And it's doing something to the edges here. Maybe that was a fertilizer or something I'd put in there. And I got one of these parrot gladiolas trying to bloom. Usually they wait till Mother's Day, but this one's liking that rain. So I was wanting to show y'all some things I learned from looking at this map of the Exodus, they'll call it. And what I learned is it's more like a charity event flyer, the 40th annual. This is something that happened every year. You can't see it so much here. This paper was crimped when it was printed. But I found another one of these that was flat and got a good print here. And that's what it says. And people think this says 40 years, but it's not. It's the 40th annual, the 40th year. And this was something that happened every year. It's not 40 years in the desert. It's a race. You know, it's the 40th annual Run What You Brung. Pull your bike out on the drag strip and see how fast it is. We're racing all weekend. Run what you brung. Everybody welcome. So this was supposed to be an ARBOIM. But I always like to find a couple copies and compare them. But I could see that this one's original. And somebody tried to do some changes on this. You can see the original markings. These are markings to let you know this is a number. You know, the T is 400, and the K is 20, and the E is 5. And you could tell that somebody added these trying to change the number here. Just to let you know how many years this is going on. You see that this was added in. These are the originals. You see the markings here. This came from the printer 400 years ago, and somebody drew this on. But the biggest clue that let me catch this was down here with Jonah. It got the story of Jonah and the whale here, being thrown off the ship and taken by the whale, and lived in there 3 days before the whale spit him up. And so I was wondering, what the hell did Jonah have to do with this Exodus? So I went to read the book of Jonah. It's just 4 really small chapters. Most of them just 10 lines. And here's the biggest clue is Jonah is actually spelled June. All June. So the track of this Exodus really gives it away. You see their track coming out. And so they say that these 40 marks here, they say is each one's a year. But according to this, the first one's in the house of Ramesses. And then they spent a year in the tent right outside there, the bee, in the land of Goshen. And then they spent a year on the other side of this river here. And this is just a day's walk. And then they spent a year on this side, and everybody thinks this is the Red Sea, but it's not. This is the Gulf of Suez. The Red Sea gets deep, thousands of feet deep. This is just deep enough to get some big ships through. They spent a year here, and then crossed it, and spent a year here. And so they come on down through Sin, and through the mud bar. And so sometimes they say this is the desert, sometimes they say it's the forest, and sometimes they say it's the wilderness, be in a mud bar. But if you pull the right Bible up here, you'll see that in the mud bar interprets as the book of Numbers, in the Numbers. So what's going on here in the Numbers sin? It's made beers in. And this is where the word beer comes from. You can't deny it. And I caught this when I was looking up these words to see what meanings they would give them in the Bible. And so many of them are not spelled the same. You won't find them in the Bible. But there's a couple two-letter words in here that only come up in the Bible. One comes up in the Torah one time, and one comes up, I think 10 times maybe. Just the plain SL. But the other one is the beer. And you'll see it here. It's this fourth word. And that and to dot, to lead at. And they say this is knowledge, anything dot here, the knowledge. And local, the locale. And beer, just a plain BR. This only comes up in the Torah a couple times, here in Genesis 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And then the Psalms wasn't in the Torah. And it'll come up a couple more times and it'll give it another meaning, but it means corn, grain. These are the things that you make whiskey and beer out of. In the book of Job, they'll say it's the base word, beer, meaning pure, clean, innocent. And that's what you have to do when you're making beer or wine. You have to make sure that all your stuff's uncontaminated. It doesn't have any of natural yeast in the air. You just want one certain yeast in there. In Psalms it comes up and they say it means the sun. The sun is usually a vin, a VNI, vin, which is a number, a vin number. And this is another place they're trying to change the language. They're trying to say a VIN number is a number that acts as a car's fingerprint for identifying its manufacturer, specifications, history. It tells what number that car was, what it's made of. You can give them your VIN number and they'll know what size motor you have and all the specifications about it. But the word comes from vin, where the word wine comes from. Vineyard, vine. And that vin tells the date and the place. Where that place is means the type of grape. Everybody grows their own grapes, and the vin tells you what type of grapes it was made out of. What's in it, your sun, your vin. His word 1247, your sun, your air, pure, clean. It seems that this word is describing everything you need to know about brewing. BR. It's Hebrew. The brew. If you look up the word beer, it's totally an old English word. Proto-Indo-European, meaning brewer's yeast. That's what you make beer and wine out of. If you don't have brewer's yeast, it's the same recipe as bread. You can use a bread yeast. It just dies at a little bit lower alcohol content. You get a higher alcohol content by using a good brewer's yeast. And so to make beer and to make wine is the same recipe. The only difference is you putting grapes in instead of hops and barley. Barley will give you a good red beer. But that's what's going on, is they're making beer. So here's, when you see waters running through a door, the water is M and the door is D. And that's where the word made comes from. It's where the word dam. If the waters are running through a door, it's either a dam or it's a made. It's the same thing here at the delta. This is a river delta. It's shaped like the Greek D. And it's where waters run through. The water's through. MD. Water's through. And made. Made beer. So, if you look at this track and you read the story, they come up these wadis. They come up here to this wadi. Wadi is a dry riverbed. It floods in heavy rains, but it's the riverbed. It's the valley where you're going to find some water. And they come up this wadi. They will go up a mountain to the end of that wadi and cross over that mountain and go down the other side into a wadi. And over here, this wadi was back and forth. This is a riverbed, is why they're making this path. And then they're finishing up over here, and they moving pretty fast through here, finishing up the race. It's a race. So in June, the vineyards in the northern hemisphere experience a critical flowering phase, also known as anthesis, where grape flowers bloom and develop into tiny green berries. The vines grow rapidly, requiring intensive canopy management. It's a race, like shoot thinning, wire adjustment, and leaf removal to maximize sunlight and air circulation. God first made man. He made the atom, or let us make man, the atom, or made. The waters through. And it used to say that this meant red, and they don't have that up here anymore. I think if we click on the number, we'll see that they say it means red. But they're always trying to change. They're always trying to make us dumber. Word origin from an unused word. But I'm not seeing red in here anymore. It looks like the Masons that done got a hold of the Bible Hub. But when God made man in his image, that tells me that God's red. He's an Irishman. He's red-haired. When Jacob was cooking up some of his red stew, is the Adam, meaning red, ruddy. The red man. You'll see it in Isaiah 6:3-2. Why red is your apparel, and made woe, W-O-A-D, woedom. Whoa, stop. You come to a red light, made woedom. Time to stop. So I'm going to turn this map sideways where north is to the left, so it'll be the same as that other one. But yeah, that's what's going on. They left the house of Ramesses here and spent a day over there in Goshen. It looks like farms there. And then they come over here to this point and crossed over the Suez, the Gulf of Suez. And if you look down over here in this corner, it'll show how deep this is. You might not be able to see it. But it gets 200 feet and then it shallows up. And best chances are they take the boat. And it's probably just the people living in this area that took the boat. These people probably walked around, saved the money. And so then they come down south here to this Cape Abu, the Rose Abu, Cape Abu Rudies. And then they went up this wadi here, the Jabal, the mountain of Muqaddam. And underneath it here is the valley of Muqaddam. Yeah, this valley of inscriptions, this is the valley of Muqaddam, which is a Hebrew word, and if you pronounce it Muqaddam, you don't know how to read either one of them, Arabic or Hebrew. You see this old Wadi Muqaddam, that's the same. When I see this written in Hebrew, I read it as from cut in. From cut in, and they'll interpret that as, and he wrote, and it was wrote in stone. It's cut in. It's just not just wrote, they wrote with pens and pencils too, but when they cut in stone, it means wrote to stay there for a while. And that's the way you would do your graffiti. This is the valley of graffiti. Wadi, the valley from cut in. Not just writing, but from cut in. And the first time this word comes up in the Bible is Exodus, during the Exodus, in the Ten Commandments. And the tablets, the work of God were, and the writing, and the Muqaddam, and them cut in, from cut in, Muqaddam. And all they, A-L-E-Y, all they, and met. It could be read as all him who, they say this is he, she, or it, but it's all they met. All they met, a share what? Do you want to share your name? Put it on the wall here. To share what you engraved on the wall. To share what all. And then, backwards and forwards, to tell, the T-L, the tell, the let, the tablets. We let most all him and them who them cut in. From cutting all they met a share what all tell the let. And so everybody would show up, and they was all eager to go, and they would sign their name on the wall on the way in. And then they would work their way up this valley, and they would spend a day in a June vineyard. And so I mapped out a bunch of these vineyards in the valley, but that's where the vineyards was, the ancient vineyards. And you see a lot of new running vineyards and some old ones that aren't working anymore here under all these green marks I put in. But that's what's going on here. These are vineyards. And some of them maybe just gardens, but you really tell when you see the vineyards. This doesn't look so much like vineyards here. This is just a garden. But you can see this is ancient. And you see most of them on the north side where they're getting the sun. The mountains not shading it. These vineyards, you'll see them, they look thinner. And it's probably just that time of the year they took the picture. And some of them are probably old and not being used now. But you can tell the vineyards because you'll see these straight lines smaller and how close together they are. And so this was all ancient vineyards. And it looks like my north had turned itself back up. But yeah, if you follow this wadi and you work a day, work a half a day, you don't tell how many people they had come in June and they're in a hurry there's a lot of work to be done in June. They would follow this wadi up to the mountain peak, and then they would come down the wadi on the other side. When you get up to about 2,500 feet, I think that's when the vineyard stops. And so you try to find the right one where you don't have to go over the highest mountain. You go over a shallower mountain and go down a different wadi. And that's why the path zigzagged back and forth. And they ended up making 3 trips through this end. Coming up one and went back and around and come down another and went back up another and went across before they ever went back up to the backside of Israel over here. And so to divide the Red Sea, that means we're going to send all you Irish laborers away. We're not taking none of you Irish with us. Divide the Red Sea. You want too much. You want too much money. We're only taking these Mexicans. And so they come down, they work at each vineyard here, up the wadis, down the wadis, up the wadis, down the wadis. And then the race here, there isn't a wadi to follow, so they're moving real fast through here. Hit a couple more of these vineyards, and then they're in the race. They're in a race here. They're going quick, and you see it. This is 40 and 41, and 40 is that's the word for the 40 years is spelled from job resign. You work at a job 40 years, but you see over here at 39, they're almost through, and this is all men double time. All men double. They're running now. They're trying to get on through there. They're trying to go to the bar now, trying to go get a drink from their works in June. As June's a critical high growth month for the vineyards in North Hemisphere, marked by flowering and rapid canopy development. Vine transitions from spring growth, setting the foundation for the vintage, requiring intense management like shoot thinning, trestling. A lot of work to be done quick. You can't take your time because Mother Nature's not going to stop for you. You can't cut grapes at the wrong time. If you cut them after February, they'll bleed to death. You got to have certain times you have to do your pruning, certain times you do your vining and aligning and run it up your wires. But this is also a time that they use to bottle the last year's vin. They age it in big cask, and then they use this time to bottle. You got to get your workers out there, so you got to have some kind of enticement. Hey, we're going to be bottling up. Everybody drinks for free during the time of bottling. Everybody gets to take a taste off the cask. That's this old fly here. Hey, come one, come all, blow out, run with your brum, drinking all weekend. And so everybody that went on this expedition that could read and write, they would write a story about the times that they had. And it was a lot of fun and games. And this is also the time of mix what. You bottle up your vin, but you don't bottle all of it. Some of your wine, you go down and mix your wine with the neighbor's wine. They'll mix several different wines together, and usually they come out with a better wine like that. You bottle your best wine, but the grapes weren't as good. You still wine them up, but when it comes June, that's when you start mixing your lesser wines, and it always comes out better. The time of mix what. And also mix the multitude. But it's a big old party, and before sending out, borrow your neighbor's articles of silver and gold and their fine dresses, and put them on your sons. Put your son in a dress. But your sons are all make-in, all M-K-I-N, all making a vin come. They all making wine. Everybody that knew how to read and write Hebrew had a vineyard. You know, everybody who thinks they know how to read it thinks a crem is a vineyard. You know, the cremu is a vineyard. You see that in Exodus 22:5, but they're looking in the wrong place. If you look in Numbers 22:5, it'll give you the definition of a vineyard. You know, anytime that you die and you left some land to your son, that would be your son's land. Your son's land is a ards. That's where the word comes from, arts. This is ARX, which is a ARTS or a ARDS, ards, of vineyards, the sons of the son's land. But then in Deuteronomy, you know, in the second law, well, then it come time to recall. Yeah, recall and to share. To share ards vin, the son, to share the son's land, the vineyards. No, you don't own that no more. Now you're going to share your vineyard. You know, the vineyards, the vin, the time and the place, and the grape and the earth. And so what makes a man is his terroir. You know, it's the time and the place and the environment, environmental factors, what's going on in that territory at the time you were born. What makes a man. Same thing what makes a wine. So this movie's getting long, so I'll make another and I'll read all I can of this flyer, this call flyer. But you know the story about June and the whale. You know, you're trying to hurry up and get through all this. Everybody wants to hurry up. And then I guess Muslims owned all of Egypt at the time because they were in a rush to get up here to Israel where they could go, because Israel is nothing but whorehouses. You'll see all throughout here, it's all whorehouses. If you read the words, that's what they say. It's all bars and whorehouses. And so it seems that, you know, Jonah, he picked him up a whale. A whale is a chick in a bar that weighs over 400 pounds trying to pick up a man. And if you get too drunk, oh, you might get caught up with a whale for 3 days. You know, she's out there trying to get harpooned. And this is something you'll see in Navy port towns. And it happens, women start eating. When their man goes out on a boat for 9 months, they don't do nothing but eat for 4 months. And then they get tired of that and they go out and try to get harpooned. You know, sailors don't have much of a choice. You know, Ford, Chevrolet, they all send their worst vehicles to Norfolk, Virginia, because they know sailors don't have a choice. They're going to buy it, and they're going to pay for it. If you don't pay your bill, you know, they'll go to the captain. Captain will take it out your check. The sailors don't get first choice in their home port. They got to go overseas somewhere to get choice. So they'll tell you Jonah, June means dove, but it means more of in a hurry. You know, after Noah had been on that boat for 40 days, and he had sent out for a whore in, H-O-R-B, a whore in, you know, and nothing, but he got nothing back. And so then he sent out who sail at the June, a hurry, the mate will rot. In a hurry, the mate will rot. You know, is what you shape. The mate you shape. It's going to be a whale. June. In a hurry. You know, the fell wind. W-H-E-N. The fell wind. You know, when you go looking for love, what you can fall a tree. What you going to bring home. What bird you going to shoot. What whale you going to harpoon. The fell 'em all. But I'm going to stop here before I get sidetracked. And I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.